The world of Skyrim begins with silence. Snow drifts across mountains that have seen thousands of winters, and wind hums through ruins where no one remembers the names carved into the stone. Every sound carries memory. Even the smallest footsteps in the frost are echoes of what once was a world that never forgets. When the team at Bethesda began shaping Skyrim, they imagined a place where nature would feel alive enough to speak. Every mountain was hand sculpted to look climbable, every valley shaped to catch fog in the morning. They wanted the player to feel the same quiet awe they felt hiking through the northern ranges that inspired it. The game's snow systems weren't just decoration, each flake was rendered as light falling on invisible air currents. That's why even a simple walk through a forest feels like meditation. The opening scene, the carriage ride through the mountains, was designed to introduce the land before the player even touches the controls. The entire landscape was meant to feel like a character ancient, powerful, watching. During testing, developers let the camera linger longer than planned, just so the wind could be heard moving through pine branches. It was the first time in the series where silence itself became part of the storytelling. Skyrim's cold light was carefully calculated using real world color studies. The artists wanted a blue so pale it looked older than time. They mixed layers of gray, white, and silver to give every glacier and cloud a sense of memory. At dawn, the color palette shifts pink and gold blend, just enough to make the player feel that warmth is still possible. Even here, Bethesda called this the hope filter. The sound team recorded hours of real wind in mountain passes across the American Northwest. They layered it with low tones made from stretched cello strings. That's why the breeze in Skyrim doesn't sound random, it has a pulse. The world feels like it breathes. Every region's wind carries its own mood, soft and slow in the tundra, whistling near waterfalls, heavy and still among old ruins. Even the animals were crafted with layers of personality. Wolves were designed to behave in family groups, circling and warning before attacking. Deer hesitate when hearing footsteps, turning just long enough to meet your gaze before fleeing. Owls were programmed to call only at certain times of night, and their echoes were recorded separately to create the illusion of depth in the forest. Bethesda wanted players to feel that everything from snow to sound responded to their presence. The people of Skyrim were written to reflect endurance. Villagers speak in tones shaped by weather, work, and repetition. Their greetings sound blunt because survival leaves little room for poetry. Yet behind every short phrase lies tenderness. When a farmer says, "It's cold today," what they really mean is, "We're still alive." Bethesda's writers studied dialects from rural regions across Northern Europe, shaping accents that felt heavy, proud, and real. One of Skyrim's most iconic design ideas came from simplicity: stone and fire. The team built hundreds of structures from these two textures. They believed that when the world loses everything else, wealth, cities, names, people will still gather around warmth and stone. Every inn, every keep, every dungeon uses those two elements as emotional anchors. The dragons that define Skyrim's story were not originally planned to speak. Early versions treated them as silent forces of nature, but the writers decided that silence made them too simple. Dragons should sound ancient, intelligent, almost regal. Their speech was constructed from fragments of Old English and Nordic rhythm, but kept slow so every syllable could echo. Even players who don't understand the words can feel their meaning through tone. The most famous line, a shout heard by millions, was recorded in a single take. The voice actor stood away from the microphone and roared until the studio lights vibrated. The sound team didn't filter it, They wanted the imperfection. They said the rawness made it feel human power, born from breath, not perfection. The dragon's language was given an entire alphabet. Artists carved it into stone slabs using metal chisels, not computers, because the texture of real carving carries subtle irregularities. When scanned and placed into the game, the letters cast real shadows depending on torchlight. That's why the ancient walls look like they could crumble if you whispered too loud. Skyrim's music became its heartbeat. Jeremy Soule, the composer, began with only one note, a deep tone meant to sound like a mountain waking. He layered choirs, strings, and horns until it became a song that felt both sacred and lonely. The chorus that repeats the word dragon in multiple languages was recorded with more than 30 voices, then echoed 3 times to sound like 90. The effect is both haunting and holy. The entire soundtrack was tuned slightly below standard pitch to create warmth. If you listen carefully, the lower tone makes every chord feel ancient, as though the world's heartbeat has slowed with age. Bethesda once described the score as a lullaby for stone. Skyrim's world is full of deliberate imperfection. Roads curve slightly too far, trees lean in odd directions, stones crack at inconsistent angles. Artists added these flaws intentionally because the human brain trusts what feels real more than what looks perfect. Nature in Skyrim feels believable because it's slightly broken. One of the most remarkable parts of Skyrim's design is the sky itself. The stars move slowly according to in-game time, following a mapped pattern based on real astronomy. Constellations drift through different seasons. The aurora lights, those waves of green and purple, are random but mathematically generated, meaning no 2 nights ever look the same. The team even adjusted their glow to reflect moon phases, giving the illusion that the sky breathes along with the player. Skyrim's mountains were hand placed without repetition. No single peak uses the same model twice. Developers joked that copy and paste doesn't survive the cold. Each ridge was shaped individually, so players could recognize them from distance, a visual language of landmarks. You can often navigate without a map, simply by memorizing silhouettes. Even the rivers tell stories. Their currents carry floating branches that spawn near fallen trees, and fish appear only in regions where water temperature and depth align. The way they dart from shadow to sunlight was modeled after real salmon recordings. Bethesda wanted motion that looked instinctive, not mechanical. Dungeons in Skyrim were designed as emotional journeys, not just places to fight. Each one begins with darkness and ends with light, a subtle metaphor for discovery. The level designers called it the candle rule. No matter how deep you go, there's always a flame waiting somewhere ahead. It's hope disguised as architecture. The voice acting across Skyrim covers thousands of lines, recorded by fewer than 100 people. Many actors voice dozens of roles, shifting tone and accent for each. Some even sang tavern songs in character between sessions. When players rest in an inn and hear a bard's voice tremble slightly, it isn't an error, it's exhaustion, recorded late at night for authenticity. Even the food scattered across tables has meaning. The way bread glows in candlelight, the way cheese is stacked unevenly, the shimmer on honey, these tiny details make Skyrim feel lived in. Every tavern table was decorated manually, no auto placement used. Bethesda believed clutter equals comfort. When players first leave the starting village, they often walk uphill toward the mountain where the world seems to breathe. That was intentional. Designers curved the road so the first horizon would show both freedom and danger, snow and sky together. It's a moment when the player feels small, but also infinite, And if you stand still in the wild long enough, the world around you continues without you. Deer wander, clouds shift, torches burn down, music fades into wind. The game doesn't pause for attention, it waits. Skyrim's magic lies not in what it gives you to do, but in how it lets you exist. The beauty of Skyrim is that it never demands attention, it earns it quietly. The first time a player hears distant thunder, it is not scripted, it is weather passing over the land in real time. The system uses invisible clouds that collide and dissolve like breath against cold glass. Lightning never strikes the same mountain twice because the game's weather seed changes each dawn. Bethesda described the effect as sky memory, the heavens keeping track of what storms have already happened. The plants that scatter across Skyrim's hillsides are not random decoration. Each one grows only in soil types that match the region's climate profile. Snowberries prefer high air pressure, tundra cotton grows near wind corridors, and mountain flowers bloom where the ground temperature stays just above freezing. Players rarely notice, but these quiet rules create realism you can feel instead of see. Every town's ambient sound carries its own heartbeat. In one settlement, you might hear saws, in another, the creak of fishing boats, in another, only the distant call of birds. Bethesda captured hundreds of field recordings, dripping caves, splashing streams, snapping firewood, and layered them beneath the soundtrack. The goal was to make silence sound detailed. The main composer once said he wrote the soundtrack like weather made of sound. Soft notes rise and fade like gusts across stone. When you enter a cave, the melody doesn't stop. It lowers into an echo. The music feels like it's listening with you. Even the horses in Skyrim have a story. They were modeled after real Icelandic breeds, short but strong enough to climb steep paths. Animators slowed each step by a fraction of a second to make travel feel heavy, as if hooves were truly meeting snow. When a horse neighs, there's a faint metallic rattle under the sound the echo of a saddle ring. That tiny detail gives the illusion that you, the traveler, exist beside it rather than above it. At night, fireflies shimmer along riverbanks in deliberate rhythm. Their light blinks at slightly uneven intervals so that no two patterns ever align. The randomness feels alive. Programmers called it organic chaos. Stand by a lake long enough, and you can watch their reflection scatter across the surface like soft Morse code from another world. The inns scattered through Skyrim are built on the same emotional blueprint: warmth in a cold world. The light inside each tavern burns orange instead of white to create a contrast with the snow outside. Musicians tune slightly flat to match the hum of the fireplace. Bethesda wanted every inn to feel like a pause between storms, a moment of rest disguised as conversation. Food recipes were researched to sound believable even if fictional. Sweet rolls, apple cabbage stew, and baked salmon all reference ingredients available in a subarctic climate. Artists hand painted char marks on bread and soup bubbles on stew. When light flickers across the food, it catches on small layers of gloss paint that mimic moisture. The illusion works. The world looks edible. The books found across Skyrim are miniature histories of humanity after chaos. More than 900 distinct texts exist, many written solely to give the sense of a world with forgotten scholars. Some contain humor, others moral tales, others fragments of myths. The writers said they built the library to remind players that knowledge survived longer than empires. Every time a player opens a book, the game briefly shifts lighting to a softer hue so the page glows warmly. That adjustment lasts less than a second, but tricks the brain into thinking firelight is reflecting off parchment. Bethesda used similar tricks to make dungeons feel breathable. subtle brightness shifts that simulate torches flickering even when they aren't. The waterfalls that pour through Skyrim's valleys were among the hardest effects to create. Developers wanted them to sound distant yet endless, so they layered recordings of ocean surf, slowed to half speed. That low rumble gives every waterfall the weight of something ancient. Stand close enough, and you can hear deep bass tones, almost like the earth humming. One of the quiet joys of Skyrim is watching wildlife interact without you. Bears fish in rivers, foxes chase rabbits, hawks circle carcasses. These moments have no gameplay reward, but they were designed as comfort proof that life continues when you are not looking. The team called it persistence of peace. The crafting tables, forges, and workbenches were placed with care. Each town's forge faces a different direction depending on the wind map, so smoke drifts away from homes. When you hammer metal, nearby guards sometimes comment, acknowledging sound as part of the world. Those remarks were added late in development to make work feel communal. Even shadows in Skyrim obey philosophy. They stretch longer in the morning and fade quicker near torches to create rhythm between day and night. Artists intentionally exaggerated the evening shadows because they believed long silhouettes evoke nostalgia. When you watch your character's shadow melt into the snow, that sense of quiet sadness is by design. The language carved into the ancient walls uses real linguistic structure. Each symbol represents both sound and meaning, allowing entire ideas to fit into single words. Writers said they based it on the feeling of truth compressed. When the player learns a new shout, the camera lingers because the light around the word pulses 3 times, syncing with the heartbeat embedded in the soundtrack. The world's wildlife population shifts subtly over time. If too many wolves are hunted, deer become more common. If too many deer are hunted, predators wander closer to villages. Bethesda didn't publicize the system, they preferred discovery. The ecosystem was their quiet simulation of balance, returning after destruction. Villages in Skyrim use a unique scent map for atmosphere. Designers simulated smells through visuals: bright herbs near bakeries, smoke near blacksmiths, steam around hot springs. The concept was called implied scent because the eye could almost smell what it saw. Weather also affects light indoors. When snow falls outside, interior lighting cools slightly, reflecting blue through windows. During storms, candles flicker faster. At sunset, golden hues spread across every room. The idea was to make the indoors feel aware of the outdoors, like even the walls remember the sky. The children of Skyrim were voiced with natural pauses and laughter that sometimes break mid-sentence. The studio hired local youth rather than professionals, asking them to speak freely between lines. Those unscripted giggles made conversations feel spontaneous. They were left untouched in editing because imperfection is authenticity. Even the smallest items hold emotional purpose. Lockpicks glint differently depending on your skill level. Gold coins reflect torchlight more warmly than metal bars. When you drop objects, they roll according to invisible floor slope data, never flat. Every spin, slide, or bounce was physics meant to whisper, "This world still follows laws." When you reach the mountain peaks and the wind howls too loud to hear music, you can still detect faint choral notes mixed into the storm. The composer hid them as comfort evidence that melody exists even when drowned by weather. It's a quiet promise that beauty outlives chaos. Time itself moves gently in Skyrim. A single in-game day passes in roughly 20 real-world minutes, chosen because it matches the rhythm of human breathing patterns when calm. At that pace, the rising and setting sun aligns naturally with the body's sense of daydream. The nights are darker than most games by intention. Developers resisted making everything visible because mystery invites imagination. They wanted players to navigate by sound and silhouette, to feel what it means to walk through unknown darkness, guided only by stars. Beneath all the grand stories, kings, dragons, wars, lies the simple truth Bethesda wanted to preserve. Stillness has its own adventure. You can stand on a bridge, watch snow slide off a roof, listen to a stream beneath the ice, and know that the world exists without requiring you to act. That is Skyrim's greatest secret, peace disguised as peril. The land of Skyrim feels alive because everything, even the quietest detail, is designed to move with purpose. If you sit still in a meadow long enough, you'll notice the grass bending in waves that follow invisible wind paths. Each gust moves differently, shaped by elevation and air temperature. The pattern never repeats, not once. The programmers called it the rhythm of breath. They wanted nature to breathe as the player breathed. When you walk through a forest, the crunch beneath your feet changes depending on what lies under the snow. Thin ice cracks with a hollow tone, while buried branches snap softly. These subtle sounds were recorded in frozen woods outside the studio headquarters. Sound engineers waited through entire nights to capture the way snow squeaks under different levels of cold. The result is that even walking feels like conversation between the player and the world. Animals use the same environmental logic. Wolves travel near cliffs where wind carries scent. Bears follow rivers because water masks their steps. Even rabbits have coded habits they prefer to run uphill since predators tire faster. Nothing about these behaviors is random. It's organized instinct, built to make chaos feel believable. The fog that rolls through valleys follows a system of simulated moisture rather than simple weather. When warm air rises over snow, fog blooms naturally, thinning and thickening as the sun climbs. Artists added light diffusion that scatters color through mist, turning sunlight into soft halos. Those glows aren't scripted, they appear when you least expect them, like small gifts for slowing down. Every cave in Skyrim carries its own humidity level. Some glisten with moisture, others feel dry and dusty. These values change how torches behave. Moisture makes flames hiss louder, while dry air makes them burn steadier. The system is mostly invisible, but it makes exploration feel tangible, as though you can smell the damp stone just by hearing the echo. Speaking of echoes, the audio team built a resonance profile for every type of surface. When you shout, your voice reflects differently against rock, ice, or wood. In long halls, the sound spirals. In narrow tunnels, it hits quick and dies fast. These reflections were recorded manually in real world locations, then digitally layered to create something that sounds impossibly ancient. The silence that follows each echo is where the magic hides. Villages across Skyrim each hum with their own unique pitch. The wind through wooden walls, the chatter of markets, the clang of hammers, all form quiet chords. Together they make what Bethesda called the music of work. If you listen carefully while standing still, each town has a key signature. Some feel minor and lonely, others warm and bright. The soundtrack even shifts subtly to match, weaving the sound of life into melody. The rivers were given a pulse. Developers measured the water flow frame by frame to match the beat of a human heart at rest. That's why the current always feels soothing rather than chaotic. Even the splash patterns of water hitting stone follow soft repetition. Bethesda didn't want sound to be just background. They wanted it to feel alive enough to slow your breathing. The world map itself was hand painted from a high altitude rendering. Designers layered photographs of clouds onto parchment textures to make it look ancient. The creases and stains were scanned from real leather scrolls. When you open the map, the faint crinkle you hear is not digital at all, it's paper bending. That single sound took more than 20 takes to perfect. At night, the constellations shift slightly between play sessions. This isn't random chance, it's intentional. The programmers altered star placement by fractions each time you load the game. They wanted players to feel like nights were connected, but not identical. It's the same sky, just remembered differently, like dreams fading at dawn. Many of the standing stones scattered across the wilderness align with the rising or setting sun day. Their placement follows real astronomical patterns drawn from old star charts. The light hitting them at sunrise was tuned to glow golden before turning white. That warmth lasts less than a minute in real time, but it's one of the most peaceful sights in the world. The blacksmiths throughout the game all hum short, unfinished tunes. Those songs share the same melody, but never the same ending. They were written as fragments of one long song that no one remembers fully. It's a quiet symbol civilization trying to recall its own harmony. Skyrim's inns were coded to feel safer than any other location. Enemies never enter, light never dims completely, and the background music stays steady. Even the candle flicker inside an inn moves slower than anywhere else. The world outside may be cold, but inside those walls, the flames never shiver. That difference is deliberate. It gives the mind a place to rest. The animals used for mounts follow emotional rules. Horses grow loyal over time, pausing longer near the player after long journeys. Dogs wag their tails faster when returning home after travel. Even the way birds scatter from trees depends on your past actions. Violent players see fewer songbirds. Peace creates presence, aggression breeds silence. Bethesda used a unique method called story weather during major events. When something tragic happens, clouds darken gradually rather than instantly. During joyful moments, sunlight brightens by only 2%, just enough for your brain to feel relief without noticing why. Emotion and weather breathe together. The ambient dialogue spoken by travelers was written to create rhythm rather than exposition. A hunter might mention the cold, then pause. A farmer might talk about grain, then hum. Each sentence ends like a sigh. Bethesda instructed voice actors to speak as though the wind might answer. It's why every conversation feels part of the landscape instead of apart from it. When players pick up musical instruments found throughout the game, even though they can't play them, their sound triggers a faint chime in the background track. That tiny note, lasting less than a second, represents potential, the idea that art still exists, even if no one performs it. The boats moored along rivers and harbors sway with invisible currents. Their movement patterns repeat in cycles tied to in-game moon phases. During full moons, the waves push harder, making the boats rock faster. It's a small touch most will never notice, but it's one of those quiet ways the world remembers the heavens. The team once revealed that no texture in Skyrim is pure white. Even snow carries faint blue and green hues because true white doesn't exist in nature. This subtle imperfection makes the landscape softer on the eyes and more believable. It also keeps the cold from feeling lifeless. Skyrim's sound engine simulates temperature. When the weather turns frigid, the high frequencies in ambient sound lower slightly, mimicking the muffled quality of cold air. That's why snowstorms sound thick, like the wind has weight. Every candle flame flickers, according to invisible drafts. The air currents inside caves, halls, and ruins are pre-programmed to move differently, so no two torches burn the same. It's random enough to feel human, Even fire obeys chaos in small doses. The guards, famous for repeating certain lines, were originally written to rotate through hundreds of remarks, but the team reduced them intentionally, realizing that repetition adds comfort. Familiar voices give the illusion of community. Those repeated phrases became unintentional lullabies of the world, reminders that even strangers remember you. Skyrim's cooking pots bubble in patterns mapped from real fluid dynamics. The ripples form concentric circles that expand, merge, and disappear exactly as boiling water behaves. That simple visual detail gives a sense of warmth even without touch. The visual team described it as fire made patient. If you stand near a waterfall long enough, the spray collects on your armor, darkening its texture. When you step away, it slowly dries, leaving faint streaks like real mineral residue. That layer of aging adds realism that quietly reinforces the idea of time continuing, even while you rest. Finally, perhaps the most poetic design choice in all of Skyrim lies in its dawn cycle. The first bird call of every morning occurs exactly 2 in-game minutes before the sun crests the horizon. It's a song that begins before the light arrives, the promise of life before proof of it. That rhythm is what Skyrim captures better than any world before or since. Patience rewarded by beauty. The world of Skyrim doesn't just exist for you to explore it, exists to make you feel small in the best possible way. Every hill hides another view, every shadow hints at movement, and every quiet breeze reminds you that the land is older than your story. Bethesda built Skyrim around the feeling of insignificance turned into wonder. The idea was that beauty becomes stronger when it doesn't need you to see it. Every sunrise in Skyrim is programmed to last a little longer than sunset. The reason is psychological slow light. Entering the sky helps players wake up naturally, while faster fading helps them settle. The color sequence follows a pattern of blue, pink, and then gold, mirroring real Arctic dawn. The sun's warmth in those early minutes is mostly illusion. It's not brighter, only softer. The team called it the kindness of light. The water physics of Skyrim are built from real topographic data. Streams twist according to slope and depth, but every waterfall drops at an angle based on gravity calculations. When you stand near a riverbank and see foam swirling around rocks, you're watching math disguised as poetry. The reflections move slightly slower than the current itself, creating the feeling of time stretching. The fog across the tundra is actually alive in code. It gathers near cliffs and fades in valleys, forming invisible hands that guide the eye. When players describe getting lost in mist, it's not confusion, it's design. Fog hides what the developers want you to discover slowly. It's mystery turned into atmosphere. Snowfall in Skyrim doesn't repeat the same pattern twice in a row. The effect runs on random sequences that adjust speed and size depending on wind direction. The snow thickens as you climb higher, thinning again near peaks because of altitude. If you walk from a warm valley into a blizzard, you can feel the transition not only through sight, but through sound, the muffled hush that replaces the rustle of trees. When storms form, the thunder follows realistic timing. You can count the seconds between flash and sound, just like in the real world. Players who notice this detail often use it subconsciously to predict rainfall. The developers smiled about that, saying, "If the player feels like they're learning nature's rhythm, we did our job." In each town, the layout tells a quiet story. Houses always face the same direction as prevailing winds, a small nod to realism. Inns sit near crossroads because travelers bring stories. Blacksmiths stand close to water, so the hiss of cooling metal blends into background noise. Even the placement of wells and markets follows invisible circles of logic. Nothing is random, it only looks that way because order hides best in the familiar. The windows of homes glow warmer in bad weather. The lighting engine brightens interior fires whenever snow falls outside, mimicking people adding logs for comfort. From a distance, those faint yellow lights dotting the mountainsides resemble lanterns of hope, proof that even in endless winter, someone is still awake. In the wilderness, fallen trees are more than decoration. Each one lies in a direction chosen to suggest wind history or age. Some crumble near cliffs to show old avalanches, others cross rivers like natural bridges. The moss growing along their bark always faces north, another real world detail carried into fiction. The environment teaches you how to navigate without a compass, nature's silent cartography. Bethesda's artists took inspiration from photography techniques. They blurred distant horizons slightly more than realism demands, adding depth through imperfection. The haze between mountains creates a dreamlike softness, as though memory itself filters the view. That effect became known as nostalgia fog. It's why Skyrim feels familiar even the first time you see it. Every fire you light has its own color temperature. Torches burn orange, hearths glow amber, and oil lamps shimmer pale yellow. These subtle shades create emotional contrast. Torches feel urgent, while fireplaces feel safe. Artists tested hundreds of tints until the warmth looked like belonging. The birds overhead don't just fly aimlessly, their flight paths follow invisible wind layers, looping and diving according to air pressure. On cloudy days, they fly lower. When storms clear, they rise higher. Those patterns shift so gradually, you might think you imagined them, but that's the secret, the illusion of coincidence. When you find a cave entrance, notice how light touches the stone around it. The brighter edges mimic frost, melting under breath. Inside, the air glows faintly blue or green, depending on mineral deposits coded into each region. Bethesda mapped those tones from real cave photography, believing color could carry temperature. The torches carried by wandering travelers burn for real time. When extinguished, the NPC pauses, sighs, and relights it using a flint spark. The timing is always exact, 15 in-game minutes. It's such a small detail that most players never notice, but it adds rhythm to the night. The world never stops tending its own fire. The stones carved with ancient words were made to sound alive. When you approach one, a faint heartbeat plays beneath the wind. The deeper the word's meaning, the slower the beat. This was not a trick, it was a sensory cue designed to create awe before understanding. Learning becomes spiritual when it's tied to rhythm. The plants that can be picked for alchemy follow the logic of patience. After harvesting, they regrow after 30 in-game days, long enough that only travelers who return will see renewal. The world quietly rewards those who linger. Every small act of waiting becomes a meditation. Animals interact with music too. The sound engine changes their behavior when instruments play in ends. Dogs relax, chickens stop moving, and cats tilt their heads. It's a tiny touch that makes even beasts feel like part of the performance. The sound director said it was his way of proving that joy can spread without dialogue. At high altitudes, your footsteps echo longer. The thinner the air, the farther the sound travels. This was coded intentionally so mountaintops feel vast, even in solitude. When thunder rolls across those heights, it feels close enough to touch. The echo carries warmth, as though the sky itself responds. When you enter a city at night, Guards sometimes carry lanterns that dim slightly as they speak. The flicker follows their breath. Animators synchronize that pulse by hand, connecting the motion of lungs to light. It turns conversation into candlelight. Two humans, one flame, shared warmth. Water dripping in caves has a rhythm based on heartbeats, repeating roughly once every second. It's not exact, but your body notices. The repetition creates calm. Many players say they feel safest underground without knowing why. It's biology hidden in sound. Every mountain in Skyrim casts a shadow large enough to change the color of nearby lakes. The reflection shifts from blue to green when under shade. Artists use this trick to make valleys appear deeper. It also makes sunsets glow brighter, contrast born from darkness. When you crouch in snow, your footprints press deeper than when you walk. The game measures movement speed to calculate weight distribution. Hunters use that difference to track creatures, but it also gives emotional weight to stillness. Stopping leaves a stronger mark than rushing. At night, if you stay still in an empty field, the soundtrack fades until only wind remains. That silence isn't absence, it's rest. The game reduces background sound levels gradually, the same way heartbeats slow before sleep. Bethesda called it the breathing of peace. The charm of Skyrim lies not in constant action, but in gentle persistence. Trees sway, rivers hum, people speak softly in the distance. Everything continues whether or not you see it. The world keeps its rhythm because existence itself is the story. And as you wander through that frozen land, the snow and stars whisper the same message. You are small, but you belong here. The quiet of Skyrim has its own language. It speaks in the whisper of wind between mountains, the crackle of fires when storms pass, the sigh of rivers under ice. Every sound tells a story older than any scroll or legend. The designers didn't fill the world with noise, they let silence shape it. They believed stillness could be just as powerful as speech. When you walk through forests at night, the sounds of animals fade one by one as the temperature drops. Birds fall silent first, then frogs, then crickets. Only owls remain, their calls spaced perfectly apart to measure time. Those intervals are exact 20 seconds between each call. The audio team set that rhythm deliberately so the mind could find comfort in repetition. If you wait until morning, you'll hear the forest come alive again in reverse. Frogs return before dawn, then birds, then the faint buzz of insects warming in sunlight. This pattern mirrors real ecosystems recorded from northern forests. Bethesda wanted nature to behave like a heartbeat, predictable enough to feel safe, but full of tiny surprises. In snow covered towns, windows glow differently depending on the hour. Early morning brings pale amber, midday shifts to gold, and night turns everything soft orange. These hues match candle lifespan. Every virtual flame burns down over time. Once the wax is gone, the light dims and flickers slower. If you return the next day, someone has replaced the candle, and the room feels alive again. Even the smallest props carry history. Every barrel and crate is stamped with faint markings showing its origin: a sawmill, a mine, or a port. The numbers are random, but the illusion creates connection. You're reminded that every object once had a maker, even in a world that forgot their names. Footsteps on stone sound different depending on humidity. When it rains, the echoes become shorter and deeper. When it's dry, they ring higher. The sound engine measures moisture in real time to alter pitch. It's subtle enough that you don't notice, but your subconscious hears it. That quiet accuracy makes your brain believe the air truly changes. The people of Skyrim each follow their own schedules, but those patterns evolve. A guard who once stood near the gate might later patrol the market instead. Merchants sometimes close early when it rains. Even beggars move toward warmer spots at night. Bethesda called this living routine a simulation of instinct. It ensures that even repetition feels organic, as though time touches everyone equally. Tavern songs, though simple, were composed to mirror the rhythm of the human heartbeat. Most of them stay near 70 beats per minute, slow enough to soothe, but steady enough to feel alive. The sound team lowered the key slightly below standard pitch, giving each note warmth. That's why the melodies feel comforting even after hours of hearing them. Fireplaces have their own patterns of movement. The flames in each inn sway with invisible drafts, coded to react to open doors. If someone enters, the air pressure shifts, and the fire flickers faster for a moment. It's such a small thing, yet it creates a sense that even air remembers your arrival. Waterfalls hum with deep tones just below the range of hearing. These low frequencies were added intentionally to make players feel calm. Humans naturally relax when surrounded by consistent bass sounds, the same reason waves soothe. Bethesda blended that science with art, creating waterfalls that sing to your nervous system. When you rest indoors during a storm, faint thunder rolls outside in sync with lightning visible through windows. The gap between flash and rumble changes with distance, giving the illusion that the sky exists beyond the walls. Even when you hide from weather, the world continues breathing outside your shelter. The animals react to weather too. Goats gather under trees, wolves stay near caves, and hawks vanish from the sky. Each creature carries weather awareness written into its behavior. If rain falls suddenly, they'll seek cover in predictable directions, tiny rituals of survival embedded in code. In mines, lanterns swing slightly when you walk past, reacting to air movement. The angle of sway matches your speed. The faster you move, the more violently they react. It makes darkness feel delicate, like the world is always one breath away from silence. The way light touches snow is one of the game's quiet miracles. The color temperature changes at dusk, giving snow a faint pink tone before fading to blue. Artists layered multiple shades of white to mimic reflection from the sky. The result feels natural, even when exaggerated cold light, that somehow feels warm because it remembers the Sunday. When you pick up a book from a shelf, dust sometimes floats through the air. That dust follows gravity based on how long the book has sat untouched. In ancient ruins, the particles drift slower, representing thicker air. It's invisible storytelling time told through dust. The wildflowers in Skyrim bloom and wilt depending on the month. Every in-game season changes plant color slightly, even if most players never notice. This seasonal code is hidden, but it alters saturation across the land, turning bright greens to faded grays in winter. The effect is faint, but it teaches your eyes that life adapts quietly. The background dialogue of wandering travelers includes lines about memories they never explain. One might mention a lost home or a dream they can't remember. These fragments were written to sound unfinished, like thoughts half remembered in sleep. The goal was to make each voice sound haunted by its own history. In the cities, chimneys release smoke that drifts toward valleys according to wind direction. The plumes thin as air, warms during the day, and thicken again at dusk. That subtle rhythm makes each settlement feel alive, like a living organism breathing through stone lungs. The torches you carry have different brightness levels depending on fuel type. Oil-based torches glow steady. Resin-based ones flicker brighter near wind. Some players discovered this accidentally, while exploring tombs. The discovery wasn't planned as a feature, but became a favorite secret among designers, proof that even accidents can create wonder. The echoes inside catacombs don't just repeat sound, they reshape it. The further a sound travels, the more its tone bends downward. This was meant to mimic the pressure of underground air. The deeper you go, the lower everything sounds, as though the earth itself is humming along. When you read letters scattered through the world, the handwriting isn't random. Artists created several distinct styles to reflect emotion. Straight letters mean calm, jagged lines mean fear, and smooth curves mean affection. Even the ink fades differently depending on the tone of the message. It's visual empathy, emotion translated into texture. The sky's color during storms was tuned to match real human perception. Green tones appear right before rain because of light scattering across moisture. The color shifts cause your body to anticipate thunder subconsciously. The developers wanted you to feel the weather before it happened. If you rest near water at night, fireflies sometimes appear earlier than usual, drawn to the reflection of moonlight. Their motion follows loops, creating patterns that resemble handwriting when traced over time. The animators called them letters of light. They exist for no reason other than beauty. Even architecture tells stories. Bridges curve slightly upward in the middle to suggest age, a design trick borrowed from real medieval masonry. When snow gathers along those arches, it melts unevenly, leaving dark lines that form natural patterns. It's decay turned into art. The stones that line the roads are arranged with small gaps on purpose. Those spaces let rain drain naturally, preventing puddles from forming. The sound of footsteps changes when you walk over them. The hollowness you hear isn't an echo, but water moving beneath the surface. Its function turned into melody. Perhaps the most remarkable detail of all is how Skyrim handles loneliness. When you travel alone for too long, the background music adjusts slightly. A single flute joins, playing slow and distant. It's the sound of solitude, not sadness. Bethesda added it as comfort, a reminder that even isolation can be gentle. Skyrim isn't a world that asks you to conquer it. It invites you to listen. Every whisper of wind, every candle flame, every footstep in snow is there to remind you that silence is alive. And as you drift through that endless winter, beneath a sky that hums with light, the land keeps speaking softly, saying the same quiet truth that peace, even in a world of dragons and ruins, is never lost. It's simply waiting to be noticed. Skyrim's magic has always lived in the quiet moments between storms, the places where sound fades, where your footsteps slow, and where even the mountains seem to listen. The world was built not only for adventure, but for stillness to make you feel that being present is enough. The designers understood something rare. When a world feels alive, you don't need constant motion to feel wonder. You just need to stop and notice. When snow begins to fall, it always starts as a whisper. The first flakes drift alone, followed by hundreds more as wind shifts direction. The sound of snow landing was recorded from real winter fields, then layered softly beneath Skyrim's ambient track. You can only hear it if you stand still. The developers wanted those who pause to feel rewarded, as if silence itself were a secret. In every settlement, there are invisible boundaries of warmth. Step close to a fire, and the air around your character brightens slightly. It's not heat you feel, but color. The glow deepens the shadows nearby, making warmth visible through contrast. The team called this painted temperature. It's how the cold world becomes comforting without words. The rivers hold their own stories. Beneath every stream lies a coded map of rocks and soil that determines flow speed. When you throw something into the water, a leaf, a weapon, or just a piece of food, it spins based on those hidden paths. The world remembers gravity. Even chaos follows laws. Bethesda designed every region with an emotion in mind. The tundra near the center represents endurance. The forests to the south feel hopeful. The snowy peaks to the north embody solitude, and the coastal marshes reflect mystery. The idea was that geography should feel like mood. A traveler walking through all four would experience a complete cycle of emotion, perseverance, curiosity, peace, and reflection. When wind howls through valleys, it's not a single sound file looping. It changes pitch as it travels between cliffs. The audio team recorded wind tunnels in abandoned mines, capturing air echoing off walls. That's why storms in Skyrim sound alive. Every gust carries the weight of distance. At night, the moonlight shimmers differently, depending on altitude. In valleys, the glow is blue. In the highlands, it turns silver. Artists achieve this by simulating thin air, scattering light more evenly at higher elevations. It makes the stars feel closer the higher you climb, a small way of saying that the sky itself rewards effort. If you stay out long enough during snowstorms, frost gradually forms along your armor. It begins with faint specks, then spreads across metal like breath on glass. As you walk near fire, it melts, leaving small wet streaks that reflect light. These changes happen so slowly that most players never notice, yet they exist to make time feel like touch. The wildlife of Skyrim behaves as though the land itself teaches them. Deer flee downhill because it's faster, while wolves pursue along curved paths instead of straight ones. Bears will sometimes sit and look toward running water as if listening. None of these animations are random. They're timed pauses meant to show awareness. Even animals are given moments of thought. When lightning flashes during storms, its reflection appears on wet stone for less than a heartbeat. Programmers calculated that reflection delay to match real physics. The effect creates depth even when unseen. Every storm in Skyrim has this truth buried inside it: chaos, shaped by precision. The clouds above are never still. They move across the sky at real time, crossing regions in long, slow journeys. If you travel far enough, you can follow the same cloud drifting from one coast to another. The system ensures continuity between horizons. The sky isn't background, it's a living ceiling that keeps time for the earth below. Inside caves, the crystals that glow faintly in the dark hum, with sound too low for the ear. Audio designers embedded faint bass notes to mimic resonance. You don't hear them so much as feel them in your chest. It's why some caverns feel safe, even in total darkness. The world sings you calm without you realizing. The snow-covered ruins scattered across the landscape were placed to mirror constellations overhead. Each major ruin corresponds to a pattern of stars, visible from its location. This alignment is subtle but intentional, a reminder that human hands once followed the sky for guidance. Even ruins look upward. When dawn breaks, shadows shrink slowly before fading completely. The transition lasts exactly 20 seconds, long enough to register subconsciously. The designers discovered that people relax when change happens gradually. It's the same reason sunrises in Skyrim feel gentle instead of sudden light practiced in kindness. The traders in each town use different greetings depending on weather. If it's raining, they mention staying dry. If snow falls, they talk about keeping warm. Even if you pass them without speaking, their dialogue shifts to suit the day. Bethesda wanted them to feel like neighbors, not just characters. The world reacts to the sky just as we do. The sound of the forge, The steady clang of hammer and anvil was tuned to match a musical note between C and D, roughly 72 hertz. That tone sits within the same frequency range as a resting human heartbeat. Subconsciously, it soothes you. The rhythm of work becomes the rhythm of life. If you ever rest in a farmhouse, the wooden walls creak slowly in cycles. The animation is tied to invisible temperature shifts, wood expanding and contracting as night cools the air. The small groans and pops make the building feel alive, like an old friend sighing in sleep. Even the smallest creatures follow stories of their own. Bees return to their hives every evening, regardless of distance. Butterflies seek heat and rest under lanterns. Fish rise closer to the surface at noon when sunlight hits the water. Bethesda filled the world with small rituals, each one proof that nature keeps time even when you don't. The stars themselves are older than the world they shine on. Each one is fixed to a point that traces real celestial maps. The larger constellations drift at different speeds, creating parallax that makes the night sky feel infinite. When you look up, you see what feels like eternity, not because it's huge, but because it moves just slowly enough to outlast you. During snowfall, the game subtly lowers the brightness of firelight to make the world appear quieter. The darker glow softens contrast, giving snow a gentler presence. The intention was emotional, to make cold nights feel peaceful rather than threatening. Every time your footsteps crunch on snow, the sound changes based on how deep it is. Shallow snow clicks sharply, deep snow muffles into a soft thud. That variation was recorded with weighted boots in real snowdrifts. The process took days, but it made each step feel grounded. When you rest at a campfire, your companion hums differently each time. The pitch changes according to mood, randomly selecting from calm, hopeful, or tired tones. The feature was small but beloved by developers. They called it Campfire Humanity. Skyrim's light and shadow system was built around patience. The world never transitions instantly. When clouds pass, light dims over several seconds. When torches flicker out, the darkness spreads like ink. Bethesda believed beauty lies in delay. The slower something changes, the more real it feels. The inns, though simple, each carry the same heartbeat sound layered into the background. You can't hear it clearly, but if you lower the game's volume, you'll notice a faint pulsing beneath the music. It's there to mimic the comfort of sleeping near others, the collective rhythm of a shared space. The mountain's snowcaps shine faintly, even at night, because they reflect starlight. This reflection was coded manually, with brightness increasing slightly as the moon grows full. The glow helps players find direction in darkness, but it also gives mountains a sacred calm giants watching over travelers. Even coins scattered on tables tell story. Their designs show faces of leaders long gone, worn smooth by years of trade. The artists modeled erosion by hand, brushing faint scratches across edges. Every coin carries memory, and when you pick one up, the faint metallic ring is tuned to the note of a wind chime wealth, sounding like weather. And maybe that's the real secret of Skyrim, that everything in it, from stars to stones, speaks the same language, the language of patience. Nothing rushes. Snow falls in its own time. Dawn waits before blooming, and even wind moves as if it remembers your name. The world doesn't ask for conquest or control. It asks for attention, for listening, for the quiet joy of being part of something vast. When you stop on a bridge and watch clouds drift across the reflection of the river, remember that moment, as small as it seems, is the very heart of Skyrim. The beauty isn't what changes, it's what endures. Skyrim's world was not meant to feel perfect. It was built to feel remembered, as though every hill, river, and ruin existed long before you arrived, waiting quietly beneath the snow. That sense of memory in the land was the heart of Bethesda's vision. They wanted players to believe the world had lived many lifetimes, that even silence carried history. The sound of wind over open fields was shaped from real recordings taken in mountain ranges where trees no longer grow. The audio engineers described it as the sound of age. When you stand on a cliff in Skyrim and hear that low moan drifting through the air, it's the world exhaling. It reminds you that stillness can have a voice. Even the rain was designed to tell stories. When drops hit wooden roofs, the pitch rises slightly. When they strike stone, it deepens. The result is that every town sounds different during storms. In forested areas, you hear the patter softened by leaves, while in cities, the noise sharpens into rhythm. Rain becomes an instrument playing across the land. The designers gave every settlement its own emotional key. The snowy villages hum in minor tones, evoking melancholy. The warmer valleys hum in gentle major chords that suggest hope. You don't hear the notes directly, but the ambient soundscape hides faint harmonies underneath the wind. They vibrate within frequencies that your mind recognizes more than your ears. When you climb high enough into the mountains, the music fades completely. Instead, you hear nothing but breath and the crunch of snow. This deliberate silence was one of the final touches added before release. The creative team called it the summit rule. No melody should compete with the view. Awe should stand alone. If you light a torch near ice, you'll see faint mist curl around it. That fog is not visual decoration. It's a small particle effect, simulating water vapor forming from heat. It's realism hidden inside poetry. The developers said it was their favorite illusion, warmth born from cold. In the evening, the horizon glows longer than in real life. The twilight was extended by several minutes to allow players more time in the blue hour between day and night. It's the most balanced light in the game, and the artist said it represents peace, a bridge between effort and rest. Every bridge in Skyrim creaks differently when you cross it. The sound depends on the material: wood, stone, or rope. The echoes shift based on how high the bridge sits above water. Some vibrate softly, others hum like old string instruments. Each crossing feels like walking through a memory of craftsmanship. The mines scattered through the world are filled with sounds of dripping water and distant hammering, yet those sounds never loop perfectly. The delay between echoes is random by a fraction of a second, mimicking how noise behaves in real caverns. This irregularity tricks your brain into believing there's more depth beyond what you can see. Even shadows in Skyrim are storytellers. They stretch slower in the morning, faster in the evening, to match the emotional rhythm of the world. Light was coded to breathe. When you rest by a campfire, the shadow of your body moves with the flames in unpredictable waves, creating the illusion of heartbeat in stillness. Snow accumulates dynamically, settling on rocks, roofs, and trees depending on wind direction. The flakes fall thicker on the side facing the storm, leaving the opposite face bare. It's a subtle reminder that every mountain and building has endured time and weather. Even structures tell stories of survival. When you listen to rivers at night, the sound deepens by a few tones. This isn't artistic flair, it's the game simulating colder air, thickening water's resonance. The difference is so slight that you might think you imagined it, but that's the charm. Skyrim whispers realism without needing to shout it. campfires burn longer during snowstorms. The game's internal code increases their lifetime slightly because players often take shelter during harsh weather. It's a hidden kindness, warmth, that waits for you. If you leave an apple or loaf of bread on a table, it stays there for days unless disturbed. But if the wind passes through an open door, small physics interactions can shift the items by millimeters. Bethesda included these micro movements to give weight to air. The world never truly stands still. At sea level, the color of the sky shifts toward green as the sun sets. That hue was chosen deliberately to mirror real atmospheric scattering. In contrast, the same sunset viewed from higher elevation glows orange. Two players could stand miles apart and see completely different evenings, an invisible connection between perspectives. In towns, the rhythm of daily life was built to mimic human heartbeat cycles. Merchants talk faster in the morning, slower by evening. Guards walk with longer pauses at night. The schedule follows natural fatigue patterns rather than mechanical timing. It's a simulation of restfulness, not just routine. Even the insects follow rhythm. Fireflies blink in three-part patterns, each pause lasting 1 second, while butterflies circle in loops of 5 seconds before repeating. These small cycles make nature feel alive because the mind recognizes structure within chaos. It's order hidden behind wonder. When you sleep indoors, the soundscape changes subtly after a few in game hours. Distant noises fade, and faint wind from outside becomes dominant. The world doesn't pause when you dream, it softens, like the land is whispering lullabies through the walls. The design team once said that every ruin in Skyrim is built around light. The first torch you see when entering a dungeon always points toward the path forward. Even in darkness, there's guidance. They describe this as hope architecture, the idea that exploration should feel like faith rewarded. The small ships docked at harbors sway differently depending on tide level. The motion follows a hidden mathematical pattern that repeats every 12 in game hours. The water and boats breathe together, creating harmony in movement. The air inside snowy regions is programmed to contain more visible particles. When sunlight passes through it, beams appear thicker, giving the impression of frozen air. Artists called it winter dust. It doesn't exist anywhere else, making cold regions feel heavier to the eyes. If you follow a road long enough, you'll notice the stones underfoot gradually change shape. Smooth stones appear closer to cities, rough ones further out. This design reflects how civilization fades into wilderness. Progress softens rock, time sharpens it again. The waterfalls carry invisible mist that increases humidity nearby. It's why torches near rivers flicker faster and why fog clings closer to the ground. Those invisible layers of air make the landscape feel physical, not just seen, but breathed. When you enter certain ruins, you can sometimes hear faint whispers. They aren't ghosts, they're echoes of your own footsteps processed through long delay filters. The sound returns just slightly distorted, making it feel like history is repeating behind you. Every piece of fabric, from banners to cloaks, flutters with its own speed. The system measures weight, length, and material to determine movement. Heavier cloth moves slowly, lighter ones shimmer in wind. Bethesda used this detail to show that the world respects physics even when wrapped in fantasy. Even colors were chosen for comfort. No white in Skyrim is pure, no black is absolute. Everything contains a hint of warmth or coolness to keep the eyes from tiring. The team spent months adjusting tones so players could wander for hours without strain. The palette itself became a kind of peace. And perhaps The most delicate touch of all snowflakes that land on your armor or cloak melts slowly when you stand near fire. Each droplet fades over seconds, leaving tiny wet streaks that dry again. The animation serves no mechanical purpose. It's there simply because life should leave traces. That's what Skyrim captures better than almost any world, the quiet truth that meaning doesn't need purpose. A torch burns, snow falls, rivers hum, and stars drift not to serve you, but to exist beside you. You aren't the center of this story. You're part of its weather, its rhythm, its long exhale of time. And in that calm understanding, the world becomes something deeper than a game. It becomes a lullaby written in stone, wind, and light. The world of Skyrim feels ancient, not because of ruins or relics, but because of patience. Everything in the land moves at its own pace. The rivers carve slowly, the clouds drift without hurry, and the people go about their lives as though time itself is a long conversation rather than a countdown. Bethesda's artists said they wanted every moment to feel like it had been waiting centuries just to meet you. The pine forests that stretch across the center of the province were modeled after real alpine ecosystems. Each tree type was chosen for silhouette rather than detail shapes you could recognize from far away. That way, even if fog covers the land, your eyes remember the horizon. This makes exploration feel intuitive. The world teaches you to navigate by memory instead of maps. The wildlife doesn't simply exist to fill space. Birds follow migration paths that repeat on quiet loops. Deer graze near rivers each morning, then retreat to hills as light fades. Predators move through territories defined by invisible circles of scent. These circles overlap just enough to create tension without chaos. The programmers joked that the wilderness has its own diplomacy. When storms roll through, the air pressure shifts subtly, and that change alters how sound travels. Distant thunder echoes longer in valleys, shorter across snow. The game's audio engine tracks this variation so that even weather seems alive. The result is that you can sense rain before it falls not by sight, but by tone. The lighting during rain was tuned to remove harsh reflections. Every drop softens color until the landscape looks painted in watercolor. It's a kind of mercy built into the storm. Even sorrow arrives gently. If you walk near waterfalls at dawn, you might notice faint rainbow fragments. They appear only when sunlight meets mist at a precise angle, a rare alignment coded deliberately. Developers called this the moment of grace, a small secret for anyone patient enough to stand still. Skyrim's interiors are built around the language of warmth. Fires sit low in the room to draw your eyes downward, where comfort lives. Tables are always round or uneven to suggest age. Shelves tilt slightly under the weight of time. Even clutter bread, mugs, folded cloth is arranged to create imperfection. The world feels human because it accepts flaws as beauty. The fabric on banners and tents moves with calculated rhythm. Wind currents inside towns are slower than those on cliffs, so cloth near markets sways softly while highland banners snap in long waves. The illusion works because motion follows logic. The environment obeys its own laws. Skyrim's snow texture contains thousands of small sparkles that catch light differently each step. These aren't random pixels, they're reflections tied to the game's light direction. When you turn, they shift like tiny mirrors. It makes cold seem alive, turning frost into stars beneath your feet. Each city's marketplace has a specific pitch of sound. Some hum with low chatter, others ring with high metal tones from blacksmiths. The mix of voices, tools, and footsteps forms subtle chords, Musicians analyzing the sound once found that together, the markets create a repeating scale that matches the main theme's melody. The world itself hums the song of its creation. Even darkness was designed with care. The shadows in Skyrim aren't pure black. They hold faint blue undertones, mimicking the way eyes adjust to low light. This keeps the world readable without destroying mystery. When you carry a torch, the flame doesn't simply brighten it, paints color back into the scene. Orange replaces blue, and warmth follows you like memory. The torches burn for real time. After a few minutes, their flame shortens, smoke thickens, and ash falls in soft trails. If you drop one, the wind can snuff it out entirely. Its fragility disguised as realism fire with a lifespan. The cobblestone roads across Skyrim use repeating shapes that fade slightly in brightness near edges. Artists painted wear into every texture by hand, so paths looked walked upon. The darker stones tell the story of countless travelers. Even before you arrive, the road remembers others. Inside dungeons, dripping water is programmed to echo off walls, with specific rhythm slow at first, then quicker, then slow again. That pattern was chosen to mimic breathing. The world exhales and inhales around you, keeping pace with the player's curiosity. The books scattered across the land hold more than words. Their pages are slightly uneven, giving each shadow depth. The fonts vary to suggest different authors. When you flip a page, a faint sound of parchment crinkles captured from real paper older than a century. Reading in Skyrim feels sacred because it treats knowledge like something fragile. The snowfall changes character at different altitudes. At lower ground, it flutters sideways. At high peaks, it falls almost vertically. Programmers adjusted wind resistance to achieve this natural drift. When you look closely, you can even see tiny eddies spinning in air pockets, miniature storms within storms. At sunrise, lakes mirror the sky perfectly for one in-game minute before wind disturbs the surface. That stillness exists only once per day. If you stand at the water's edge during that time, you can see mountains reflected so clearly that it feels like looking into another world. The effect vanishes the moment you move, a gentle lesson in the value of staying still. Fires burn brightest when you first light them, then dim after several minutes. If you add new wood, they flare again. The cycle was designed to mimic real oxygen flow, but also to remind players that warmth needs tending, a small metaphor for hope itself. When thunder rolls across plains, it echoes twice, once from clouds above and again from ground below. The double resonance makes each boom sound enormous. The delay between them is exactly half a second, the same interval used in orchestral drums to create awe. Skyrim's snowfall has sound, not the falling flakes, but the soft hiss they make when landing on leather or fur. This was recorded with real fabric in a sound booth chilled to freezing. The noise is nearly inaudible, yet it adds texture to silence. It's how cold feels audible. In mountain caves, crystals glow brightest when you draw near. They respond to torchlight, reflecting color back at you. But if you extinguish the flame, the glow lingers for several seconds before fading. The illusion makes darkness seem patient, reluctant to swallow light too quickly. When you rest in an inn, your bed creaks once as you lie down, then settles into stillness. The sound is tied to the game's physics rather than animation. It was added to trick the mind into thinking comfort has weight. Even rest has a sound. The tavern musicians tune their instruments slightly differently in each town. The colder regions sound sharper, the warmer ones softer. This subtle variation reflects temperature's effect on real strings. Listeners rarely notice, but the world feels consistent because even music obeys the weather. Every piece of pottery carries faint fingerprints. Artists modeled them from clay pressed by hand, scanning the texture into the game. When firelight hits the surface, those prints catch tiny highlights, reminding players that human touch built everything. If you drop an item into deep snow, it sinks realistically, disappearing beneath the surface. When the storm clears, the top layer melts slightly and the lost object can reappear. It's not scripted, it's physics slowly revealing memory. The moon reflects differently over ice than over water. Ice doubles brightness, water halves it. The contrast helps players find rivers at night by following softer reflections. The moon becomes a guide rather than decoration. Skyrim's wind never moves at the same speed twice. A hidden algorithm changes gust intensity every few seconds, creating an endless variety of whispers. Sometimes it roars, other times it sighs. The land breathes with you, and perhaps the most touching detail of all the world remembers kindness. Feed a wandering dog, and it follows longer next time. Spare a bandit once, and they may greet you as friend later. These changes aren't announced, they simply happen. It's empathy hidden in code. That is the true soul of Skyrim, a world that feels alive not because it needs you, but because it chooses to share small moments with you. Snow, sound, and starlight all carry gentle purpose. They teach you that peace isn't the absence of danger, but the quiet acceptance that even in frozen places, life keeps whispering. Skyrim is not remembered for noise, but for the stillness that lives between sounds. The silence in its valleys feels older than speech, and the wind that passes through its ruins sounds like the world remembering itself. Every whisper, every footstep, every flake of snow carries purpose. The game doesn't demand that you listen, it simply waits until you do. Each morning in Skyrim begins with a quiet conversation between light and shadow. The first rays of dawn travel across the land like brushstrokes, painting color back into the world. Snow takes on faint gold, rivers mirror pale blue, and mist curls away from the earth as if it's being lifted gently awake. This slow rising of light was designed to last longer than any other part of the day, not for realism, but for grace. The developers wanted sunrise to feel like gratitude. Even the smallest ripples in the water have stories. When you toss a stone into a lake, the rings spread farther in colder regions because the simulated water density is higher. It's one of those invisible layers of care that makes the world feel tangible. A simple splash becomes physics disguised as poetry. At night, the air hums differently depending on how high you stand. Down in the valleys, the wind is soft and round, almost like a breath against your ear. High in the mountains, it sharpens a whistle edged with ice. The transition between these sounds happens naturally as you climb, creating a sense that altitude itself has personality. Every campfire in Skyrim burns in rhythm with its surroundings. The crackle slows in cold regions and speeds up near warmer climates. This change is subtle, yet it keeps the mind engaged. Warmth moves faster, cold moves slower, even fire respects the weather. Inside the old tombs and ruins, every candle flame was placed by hand. Artists refused to automate lighting because each torch had to cast emotion as well as brightness. Some flicker quickly to show tension, others burn steady to suggest safety. The shadows that move along the walls follow coded geometry that mimics natural airflow. Darkness in Skyrim isn't the absence of light, it's light learning where to stop. The air indoors carries dust that dances in invisible drafts. Those drifting particles aren't random, they follow real airflow models that bend around heat sources like torches or ovens. If you stand still long enough, you'll see how the dust curls around you, proof that the world breathes even when quiet. The snow crunching beneath your boots changes tone depending on weight, slope, and temperature. Lighter steps make a crisp sound. Heavier ones sink into dull thuds. When the temperature drops below freezing, the pitch rises. The result is a soundscape that evolves as the weather does. Every footstep a different kind of song. When you pass through mountain passes, listen closely. You can hear the echoes of your own movement returning from far off cliffs. Those faint responses aren't scripted, they're mathematical. The sound engine calculates how long it would take your step or shout to travel, bounce, and return. Every canyon has its own rhythm. It's as if the land replies when you speak. The lanterns that line some bridges flicker slower than indoor flames. The developers made outdoor light sway with wind speed, giving each torch a signature dance. Some flare bright, others tremble softly, and together they make a symphony of tiny suns along the road. These little glows become company in the dark. The color of Skyrim's sky at dusk is never exactly the same twice. Tiny fluctuations in moisture and cloud cover alter the hue each evening. Sometimes it's violet, sometimes rose, sometimes a pale orange that melts into gray. The effect is called emotional weather. It's not the player who changes mood, it's the sky. Even the ravens perched on ruins were given logic. They tilt their heads toward sound sources and flutter away if startled by weapons drawn. When you lower your sword, they sometimes return, landing in the same place. It's forgiveness written in code. The world always offers a second chance. The inns have layered audio loops that mimic human life at rest. When you sleep there, faint murmurs, coughs, and turning of beds play beneath the music. It gives the sense of shared comfort, the sound of others existing peacefully nearby. It's what home would sound like if peace had a voice. The trees sway in slow cycles that rarely sync up. This slight difference between one trunk and another prevents the world from feeling mechanical. Nature moves in gentle chaos. The leaves rustle softly out of rhythm, and the result is harmony. Snow settles unevenly across rooftops. Artists simulated wind sweeping through towns to decide which side of each building collects drifts. It's why some roofs remain bare, while others wear thick blankets of white. This asymmetry is authenticity weather that plays favorites, just like the real world. Even the stars follow subtle imperfection. They twinkle with slight delay, as though filtered through shifting air. The twinkling algorithm includes a random pause every few seconds to mimic the way real starlight bends through the atmosphere. It's science turned lullaby. When you step into certain forests, the sunlight filters through branches in long, moving columns. Those rays change shape as trees sway, breaking light into fragments. The visual designers called these breathing beams. They move slow enough that your eyes relax while watching, a small kindness to balance the cold. At dawn, if you stand near a frozen lake, you can sometimes hear faint cracks echoing beneath the ice. That sound was recorded from real glacial movement. It isn't danger, it's just the frozen world stretching as it warms. The developers left it in because it sounded like the earth sighing awake. The chimneys in towns release smoke that thins gradually as it rises, dispersing into the wind. Each puff fades at different speeds based on temperature. On cold mornings, it lingers longer, painting gray ribbons across the sky. It's a portrait of life continuing, one breath at a time. The rivers under moonlight reflect the sky in perfect mirror for only a few seconds each night, right before midnight. That moment was programmed intentionally when light aligns at the right angle. It's the game's smallest miracle nature holding its breath before beginning again. When you crouch in deep snow and stay still, the soundscape changes. The wind softens, and the world becomes nearly silent. It's the closest thing Skyrim has to meditation. The silence is so full that you can almost hear time itself slowing down. Even ruins crumble according to logic. Stones fall in directions consistent with gravity and age, while moss grows thicker where sunlight touches more often. Artists use these details to make every broken wall look believable. Decay in Skyrim isn't destruction, it's memory taking shape. The moon's glow carries a faint shimmer that spreads across surfaces facing east. This subtle reflection helps guide travelers at night without them realizing it. The world lights your way in silence, the sky watching kindly from above. If you rest long enough in a quiet field, the camera begins to tilt ever so slightly toward the horizon. This invisible feature was meant to imitate how humans naturally gaze at distant light when relaxing. It's small enough to feel like instinct. When snow covers graves in small villages, the texture fades more slowly than anywhere else. Developers wanted those places to seem protected, as though warmth lingers over memory. The snow doesn't melt faster, it just appears gentler. And when all else fades, the sound, the light, the music, the wind remains. It moves softly through pine and stone, carrying with it the last voice of the world. In those moments, when nothing happens and everything feels still, you understand what Skyrim truly is. It isn't just a land of dragons or war or endless quests. It's a reminder that beauty doesn't shout, it whispers, it waits, and if you listen long enough, you realize that peace has always been there, hidden in the spaces between each breath. There comes a moment in Skyrim when the world feels completely still. No enemies nearby, no quest to follow, no sound except wind moving softly through pine. It's in these moments that the true heart of the world reveals itself, not through action or glory, but through silence that listens back. Bethesda built Skyrim around this kind of quiet. It's not emptiness, it's presence. The stillness becomes its own kind of story. The snow doesn't fall evenly across the land. It drifts with invisible rhythm, following the pull of air between valleys and mountains. Every flake spins differently before landing. The lighting engine catches these tiny movements, bending brightness around them so that no two moments of snowfall ever look the same. The world creates infinity through repetition. In the early morning, the horizon begins to glow before the sun rises. That faint silver band at the edge of the sky lasts only a few seconds, but it exists in every dawn. It's called sky breath in the design notes, the moment before light and shadow trade places. The team believed that beginnings should arrive gently. The rivers that cross the tundra are more than water. They're lines of movement that shape wildlife, plants, and even sound. Their tone lowers when the current slows, rises as it passes over rocks, and hums in tune with wind direction. It's like the land singing to itself. You can almost feel the melody beneath your feet if you walk long enough beside it. The mountains hold secrets not of treasure, but of silence. Their echoes change depending on season. In warmer months, sound fades quickly. In winter, it carries farther. That small difference makes voices feel closer when the air is cold. It's why shouts and footsteps seem louder in the snow. The world itself is listening. At night, the two moons cast different shades of light. One glows blue-white, the other amber. Their colors mix across the snow, painting shadows that change hue as the moons drift apart. The system was designed to keep the world alive even while you sleep. The sky never rests, it just changes its song. The torches that line roads are timed to burn out right before dawn. This was a deliberate decision, a small bit of poetry coded into the game. The world doesn't need fire once the light returns. It's the land itself exhaling after a long night. In some forests, faint light passes through mist like 1,000 tiny diamonds. That sparkle isn't an illusion, it's microscopic particles scattering light. The artists exaggerated it slightly to make every morning feel like waking into a dream. They wanted players to remember that even cold air can shimmer with hope. When you step through open fields, the grass bends under invisible pressure. Each blade reacts to your steps individually, leaning away and rising again. The animation is subtle, but it makes the world feel soft, as if it forgives your presence. Skyrim isn't a land that punishes footsteps, it welcomes them. Every village fire pit burns at the same height, no matter the weather. The flames flicker with rhythm, tied to the heartbeat tempo used in the soundtrack. This connection between music and fire creates harmony that players don't consciously hear but instinctively feel. Even warmth keeps time with melody. The stars above Skyrim form patterns meant to comfort the player. The constellations are arranged so that no matter where you stand, one cluster always points north, a gentle reminder that direction is never truly lost. The designers said it was their way of saying you can always find your way home. Inside caves, water drips slower than in the open world. The sound delays are stretched slightly to give the sense that time itself moves differently underground. That pacing shift makes every descent feel like a dream slowing down, a descent into memory rather than danger. The color of ice near torchlight fades from blue to white as it melts. The shader used for this transformation took months to build, but the team insisted on it because they believed warmth should always leave evidence. Even light leaves fingerprints. In distant tundras, the wind hums in repeating cycles. Each pattern lasts about 4 minutes before resetting. The slight variation gives you the sense of time without clocks, just rhythm. The land keeps time the way the ocean does, through sound instead of numbers. Every piece of armor carries tiny scuffs and scratches. None are random. They appear based on region, meaning that traveling through snow leaves frost marks, while walking through dust leaves pale streaks. Your journey paints itself onto you without your noticing. When you return to a place you've visited before, ambient sound levels rise slightly. The world greets you, even if you don't realize it. Bethesda programmed the land to sound friendlier when familiar. It's as if the mountains remember your footsteps. If you sit near a fire long enough, the background music fades away entirely. Only the crackle remains. The fade out takes exactly 1 minute, time to let your body relax. The sound of peace replaces melody, silence shaped like comfort. The fog that rolls through valleys at dawn is affected by nearby water. If a river runs close, it carries moisture higher into the air. This makes the mist seem to breathe. In quiet mornings, it feels as if the whole world is waking beside you. Even the animals dream. When wolves sleep, their chests rise and fall in steady rhythm. Horses shift their hooves in subtle circles. Dogs bark softly, chasing something only they can see. Bethesda added these animations not for gameplay, but for empathy, to remind players that life continues even when unseen. The flicker of candles in homes is tied to invisible drafts that shift with open windows. When a door closes, flames straighten. The world responds to movement the way air does in reality. Even the smallest gesture has consequence. When rain passes, droplets linger on wood and stone. Each surface dries at its own pace, creating a mosaic of light and shadow. That drying process uses a fading effect stretched over several minutes. The beauty lies in slowness. Healing takes time, even for weather. If you walk through the fields after dark, you can sometimes see the faint glow of insects rising like sparks. Their paths follow invisible loops that trace old migration lines from before the war. They're ghosts of rhythm, reminders that even chaos remembers order. Every lantern in Skyrim has a sound, a faint glass rattle when wind touches it. Those noises combine with whispers of rope and wood to make nights feel alive. Darkness in Skyrim isn't emptiness. It's full of small voices waiting to be heard. When you look across the land from a mountaintop, every patch of fog, every glimmer of water, every shadow cast by a cloud exists in real time. The world never paints illusions. What you see truly lives below, breathing, moving, and glowing in its own rhythm. And when you finally lie down in one of the inns, the night hums softly around you. The fire dims, footsteps fade, and the air warms just enough to make you exhale. Outside, the snow keeps falling, indifferent but gentle. The sky glows faint with starlight, and for a moment, the world feels endless and safe. That is Skyrim's quiet promise that beauty endures through stillness, and peace exists in the simple act of noticing. The land doesn't rush, it doesn't beg to be understood. It simply keeps living, one breath, one gust of wind, one falling snowflake at a time. And if you listen closely, you might realize that you've become part of its rhythm, not as a hero or legend, but as another heartbeat in the frozen air, calm, steady, and eternal. The truest magic of Skyrim has never been its spells or dragons. It has always been the quiet between them. When the wind pauses for a heartbeat and snow drifts weightless in the air, you begin to understand what the world has been saying all along. It whispers that stillness is sacred and that every small sound carries memory. The creak of a wooden sign in the wind, the low hum of a forge, the steady rhythm of waves against the shore, all of them are lullabies written for a tired traveler. The coastline of Skyrim was shaped by patience. Each tide that rolls in leaves a faint wet line along the rocks, and that moisture reflects light at different shades of blue and silver depending on the moon. The longer you stay by the water, the more alive it becomes. Tiny ripples catch starlight like fragments of shattered glass, and the air smells faintly of salt and pine. Bethesda built this shoreline to sound like breathing, soft inhales, and gentle sighs. It's the rhythm of endurance, a song the world sings to itself. The cliffs above the sea hold the oldest stones in the game's design. Their colors fade from gray to green as lichen spreads slowly across them. Each texture layer was painted by hand, representing hundreds of in-game years of weather. The longer you stare, the more you feel time pressing quietly against the rock, not erosion as destruction, but as memory turned to color. If you travel inland and stand among the tundra plains, you'll notice how wind moves like a tide through grass. Each blade bends in sequence, forming invisible waves that roll across the land. The animation was coded to mimic ocean motion, giving the sense that even far from water, the ground remembers it. Skyrim's land and sky move like the same heartbeat, each echoing the other. When clouds gather before a storm, light scatters differently through them depending on the hour. In early morning, they glow soft pink. At dusk, they turn violet. The storm never looks identical twice. The developers called this weather memory. It means that even chaos has history. The candles flickering in ruins never truly go out. If you extinguish one and return days later, it will be lit again. Bethesda explained that some things in the world simply refuse to stay dark. Hope, they said, needs no explanation. The game lets light defy logic because the heart does too. Each piece of armor that hangs in shops or homes sways slightly when air passes by. The metal clinks with small chimes, different for iron, steel, or gold. These faint tones were tuned deliberately so no two objects ever sound the same. Even silence has its texture, piece made from subtle sound. If you visit an inn and fall asleep, the screen fades, but the world continues breathing. The wind hums through gaps in the walls. Someone coughs downstairs. A mug clinks. These tiny noises play beneath the darkness. They're not there for realism. They're there to remind you that rest doesn't mean the world stops. It just keeps watch while you sleep. At sunrise, the fog that gathers in valleys thins first near rivers, then over plains, then along roads. The order is intentional. It makes the player's path visible before the world itself clears. It's subtle guidance written in light. The world doesn't tell you where to go, it simply clears a way. Snow piling against windows is coded to grow thicker after storms. If you return to a cabin days later, you'll see the frost higher than before. It's a small illusion of time, like footprints fading under new snow. Skyrim constantly reminds you that the world moves with or without you. Even the birds follow invisible seasons. Their songs shift slightly depending on in-game month. Early months sound brighter, late months lower and slower. You might not notice it consciously, but your emotions do. The tone of the world changes with its age. In the forests, mushrooms glow faintly at night, not with magic, but with bioluminescence. The artists added this glow after studying real organisms that thrive in dark, damp air. The gentle light feels alive, breathing softly in rhythm with the environment. Even decay becomes beautiful when treated with care. If you ever stop at a frozen lake and watch closely, you'll see faint fog rolling just above the ice. It's not smoke or magic, it's air trapped beneath the surface, escaping slowly as the ice expands. The sound that accompanies it, a deep crack echoing across the distance, was recorded from glaciers. It's nature's reminder that even silence has motion. The lights inside windows flicker individually. Some dim quickly, others stay bright longer. Each flicker represents a life unseen, someone reading, someone sleeping, someone tending a fire. These little movements give towns a sense of soul, as if the world holds countless quiet stories unfolding all at once. The sky's reflection in puddles bends slightly as you move. The angle changes with perspective, simulating the distortion of light in shallow water. It's realism you don't notice until it's gone. Bethesda once said, they build immersion from details small enough to be invisible. You feel the truth without needing to see it. When you enter a cave with an underground river, listen closely. The drip and flow blend into soft rhythm. It's composed like music, looping in threes. The sound engineers described it as the song of stone. It comforts without melody. Snow-covered branches snap occasionally during heavy wind. The sound isn't random, it follows a schedule tied to storm strength. This gives the impression that weather has weight. Even trees must bend beneath it. In every part of Skyrim, warmth and cold share balance. Fire always finds a home near ice, and ice always reflects fire. You'll see torches burning near frozen waterfalls, or glowing embers lighting the edge of snowdrifts. The design reminds you that contrast is harmony. Without cold, there's no comfort. Without dark, there's no light. And when all motion fades, the world still moves. Wind hums over empty roads. Snowflakes drift without sound. Stars tremble in air, too thin to hold them steady. Skyrim was built as a place that never truly sleeps, yet somehow always feels like a dream. The final secret is that there are no real secrets, only details hiding in plain sight, waiting for quiet eyes. Every sound, every shimmer, every shift in color exists to remind you that peace is not found in action, but in observation. The world doesn't ask you to conquer it, it asks you to breathe with it. So if you ever return to those northern lands, to the mountains that hum, to the rivers that sing, to the stars that drift, remember what you learned there. The cold is not cruel, the silence is not empty, and the wind does not mourn. They simply exist, patient and timeless, waiting for someone to listen. In that listening, you find rest. You find the rhythm of the world. And as snow falls across the quiet valleys, you realize you've been part of its story all along.